realistically, at the top corner, just trying to keep the costs down.
RMI, welcome to the ordinary meeting of council this morning. I don't believe we've got any apologies. I see Bonnie was noted, but she looks like she's here in person, so I'm pretty sure we're all here. Sure. Or on Zoom. So welcome, Peter. Any declarations of interest this morning? Not aware of any. Not aware of any public forum, petitions, deputations or other this morning. So we'll move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes for the ordinary meeting of council of the 12th of August. No alterations. Would somebody like to move? Moved by Eric, seconded by Bonnie. I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. We'll move to the confirmation of minutes for the extraordinary meeting of the 3rd of September. There's no alterations. Would somebody like to move a true and correct record? Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Lyndall. Motion, all in favour will say aye. Aye. Against, no, carried. Right, we'll move to item 6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. The first one up is the Southport subcommittee meeting of the 27th. David, would you like to comment on your meeting?
Probably not a lot to comment on, Mr. Chairman, but the fact that the Chair gave us a report. Obviously, at that stage, the share market was sort of having problems with at the time, and he couldn't give a lot of detail publicly. But no, certainly he had a very good report. And other than that, probably not a lot more I can say.
Move the adoption.
I will do that.
Seconder for that resolution, Southport subcommittee that was there. Jeremy? All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to the Organisational Performance and Audit Committee meeting of the 2nd of September. Lyndall, would you like to comment on the meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of things. Just to note that the financial year report was better than forecast, ever so slightly, so well done those people. And just to highlight the fact that in item 4, the auditor requested a delay for the adoption of the annual report due to advice coming from that all annual reports could be delayed due to COVID situations. So those people who are watching the calendar, it's quite all right. We have until the 26th of November to adopt our annual report, and we will do it then. With that in mind, I will move that motion. Thank you.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Lloyd. Put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Right, we'll move to the regulatory meeting of the 3rd of September. Neville, would you like to comment on the meeting?
No, I think the minutes speak for themselves, Chairman. I'll move just answer the questions and what come up. So just before we move, Mr. Chairman, there's a question from Robert regards a meeting in Queenstown, and there's a comment there made by myself, and as regards the photo footage at that meeting. It should have been when questioned, those photos were actually of the winter wintering, were actually the previous year, not this year's. And so whether they were in Southern was debatable also. So I may not have made myself clear at the time.
So you'd be happy with an alteration to the minutes too? Somebody like to second that?
I'll second that, Mr. Chairman.
All in favour will say aye. Right, we'll move to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting on the 3rd of September.
I've moved the regulatory ones. We didn't have a second to
I think we did get yeah. So no, it has been moved and seconded, I think we've got that. Yep, no, so we're all good. So we'll move to the Strategy and Policy Committee meeting of the 3rd of September. Eric, would you like to comment on?
Thank you, I'm happy to move. I just note it wasn't a very long meeting, but a couple of points of interest. We had a presentation from Abe DeWald, who outlined some of his travails and problems with consenting process, which was something which certainly a valued contribution in terms of understanding from an applicant's point of view. And we spent some time looking at the air pollution from ships. That's item 1 on it, and again, it's been a subject which has presented itself a few times for us, so I'm happy to move.
Moved, seconded by Lyndall. All in favour say aye. Aye. And last but not least, Regional Services Committee meeting also the 3rd of September. Jeremy, would you like to comment on the meeting?
Chairman, the main things were we obviously had annual reports on the land water service, the biosecurity and biodiversity operations, the road and district works program, so we enjoyed meeting and everything was along reasonably well, but we did thank obviously the works program crew, obviously the flooding, so they've done a major job and got through all that and we're getting the banks up to spec, so that was pretty good. Yeah, so I'm happy to move. There was just one word, I stand to be corrected, but on page 44, under Phil's on Doc was investigating using a Judice fig. I just checked to make sure
Judas.
make sure they didn't have another secret system they were going to
Judas is blamed.
operative working for them, so I take it that it needs to be Judas, Judas, not ICE. So I'm happy to move that with that week.
One small alteration there too. I've got a mention in those minutes and I didn't actually attend that meeting. So on page 41, third paragraph. Councillor Beard commented.
I'm happy to move that with those adjustments.
Moved by Jeremy, seconded by David. All in favour say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 7, which is the notification of extraordinary and urgent business, supplementary reports or other. I'm not aware of any this morning. We'll move to item 8, which is questions. I haven't been made aware of any this morning. That'll take us through to item 9, which is the reports. Chairman and Councillors' reports. I'll just report verbally briefly on a couple of the more recent ones, and if there's any questions on the list of engagements or meetings, I'll be happy to answer. Now, we hosted the Essential Fresh Water Hui in the last couple of weeks, and probably a little bit of confusion with the public. There have actually been 2 meetings. The first one was farmer initiated, but was facilitated by Environment Southland. It was actually good to have Ministers Parker and O'Connor in the room. They appeared to be listening intently, and they made the offer to Environment Southland that they would appreciate some correspondence from us in any ways of refining and improving some of the wording. But I thought that was a very good meeting. It was followed by our own meeting, which was already in track, and at which there's been a committee set up with industry reps, Fish and Game, iwi, MFE, and MPI to actually look at advice that could be referred back to the ministries and the ministers involved. So I think that's been quite positive, and I think we have regulations out there that as a regional council we need to be able to make work, and if we can put some tweaks that make them more user friendly, that's going to be the betterment of everybody and water quality. Earlier this week I was privileged to attend the meeting with the Prime Minister, who principally spoke about the Labor Party's policy on Tiwai Smelter. The Mirror Forum and industry have been making representations over the last several months, I guess, since the announcement of the likely closure of Tiwai within 12 months. And I guess Southland's concern was manifold. One, the job losses, but it was immediately apparent, I guess, that if the smelter closed in that time frame, we would have stranded power that had nowhere else to go, and significantly the 60 odd million paid by the smelter for transmission costs would have to go somewhere else. And so those items were covered fairly well the other day. And okay, this is Labor Party policy, but also coming from the current Prime Minister. I thought it carried quite a bit of weight. And I think probably more importantly, most of the major parties are talking the same lines, very much about an extended transition, not necessarily long term, but recognising there was a time frame to get other industries up and running. And so I think that's encouraging. The Prime Minister also talked about just transition funding, which I guess the first cab off the rank, and that has been Taranaki. And I think there's a sum of $5 million has been put into getting a presence in Southland going forward to actually work with the community on possible alternatives in regional development going forward. But also was actually encouraging to also have a bit of acknowledgement that power was for Southland's regional development and reasonable support, I guess, for trying to find an alternative so that power could remain in Southland rather than the huge expense on taking it to the North Island and the obvious power losses. So I thought it was a good meeting. Happy to take any questions on any of the verbal reports or any of my other meetings I've attended. Robert.
Chairman, that's a very interesting discussion you had there with the Prime Minister, and I know that Ngāi Tahu have spoken up with regard floating an idea about hydrogen development using that electricity. Do you know if the Pebbly Hills silica project has also made their views known? Because through Steve Kenny or whatever agency he is in now, Great South, because I know that was a very well promoted industry, potential industry for Southland, and all it needed was energy in order to turn those pebbles into high-grade silica. Has there been any approach that you know of about that?
Not in recent times, Robert. I've certainly heard the debate in the past. At the moment, we're still hearing about the potential for oat milk. We're hearing about hydrogen in particular, and there is obviously offshore demand for hydrogen in the foreseeable future. The Prime Minister did ask a few questions about timeframes for that type of industry, which I think they're quite attracted to. But and agriculture was obviously also mentioned as being another potential earner for Southland. But that one in particular didn't come up. I've got Lloyd, then Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to follow on from that, my understanding is through the Mirror Forum there is a list of interested parties at the conclusion of Tiwai. So there's a list, and they have not advertised that, they have come to them. So there are people who around the world are looking at this opportunity down here in Southland with this renewable energy power source, and we just look forward to that developing out into some formal process later on. But I think the encouraging bit is that people were looking, and they have come and look and basically put proposals in a theoretical high level on the table for consideration. So it's actually quite encouraging.
Eric.
Lloyd's more than partially covered what I was going to say, but I think Southland's got to the stage where accepting this is happening. It's a time frame of when. So when that happens, this will be the largest available clean power in the world. And I'm wondering just how vigorously we are promoting that opportunity internationally. The thinking, to my view, at the moment has been reasonably parochial, but we need to have a process where we go onto the world stage to just garner what interest we can and opportunities. And I don't believe the answer is in reticulating this around New Zealand, that it's just not going to happen with pylon needs and Cook Strait cables and a whole lot of other things. We need to really drive the interest factor into what is attractive to the world. We've had an international company in there, it's gone, largest supply of clean power in the world becoming available.
I think Silicon Valley might be one of the players in that.
Yeah, well, who knows which one, but let's get them all on the table and have a process.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
could I ask a question, please?
Peter's calling you up, Mr. Chair.
You're next, Peter. I'll just come to you in a second.
Sorry.
So there's everything from Tesla batteries, data centres. There's certainly a lot of interest that's coming from outside the country. Yeah. So, but it's a good point that we as a region and government probably do need to have a bit of joint up publicity. Peter, you've been waiting patiently.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just on your earlier comments about the visits of the two ministers down south a few weeks ago, and it's a pretty high interest topic, isn't it, around the intensive winter grazing rules? And you mentioned the word tweaks. What exactly does tweaks mean? Just trying to get a bit of certainty to be found for people. Is it tweaks around the rules or around interpretation? If you could help us with that, it would be good.
Well, I think we've got a fairly strong steer from Minister Parker that they weren't going to go revisit in a wholesale way the regulations, but they were very open to changes that would make them more workable. And I understand Cabinet can make slight changes by orders in council, which I think is so that it's a reasonably simple process. And obviously nothing will change now until after the election because we're in a campaign process and we'll have to talk to the new government. But yes, the current minister would not look at a total revisit. He's quite adamant he wants to see the water thing move, and I think we all do. So it's more about making some of those rules a bit more user-friendly. We've got regional issues that come, sowing dates, things like that which can be, I think, changed without changing the intent.
Okay, so that's what I'm just trying to establish. So maybe a tweak could be lengthening out those sowing dates, or a tweak could be changing from the 20 centimetres or the pugging rules, lengthening those out.
I think so. You go back to the high level intent, which we probably all agree with, and it's just getting the wording right that's practical. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Rob.
Through your chair, just I guess it was pretty clear that it is around fine tuning, tweaking, whatever. They've already done some fine tuning already around pugging around gateways and around troughs. So, but it is a matter of the advisory group we've set up coming up with some advice around what is sensible that's going to make the regulations work in Southland and be pragmatic. So and the second part of this advisory group is also looking at the role of farm environment plans and implementing the regulations. So we'll know more as this advisory group shapes up their thinking and has some discussions with officials about this as well. So that's, and as we've talked about before, this is also something we're liaising with the other regional councils about as well.
No, thank you for that, Rob and Nicole. Yeah, people are really hungry for information on this topic. So thanks.
And I think the ministers were quite surprised at the appetite from the farming community to fast track audited farm plans. And the comment was made that the consenting regime was seen as a stopgap. And well, I see from the Labor Party have put into their own policy into the election, actually putting funding into that area. So I think already we've had a positive effect on getting things better and going forward. Any further questions on any of the activities over since the last meeting? If not, I'll ask if there's any reports, verbal reports from councillors that they'd like to raise at this stage. If not, we'll move to item 10, which is, and first up is the Chief Executive's report. Rob, I'll hand over to you to talk to you about the comprehensive report.
Thank you, Chair. Just, look, I'll take the report as read, just maybe a couple of small things I'll just mention around there's been a focus in the organisation around looking at the freshwater package, government's freshwater package and what it means for Southland, and we've got a cross-council team working on that, led by planning with consensus compliance and science teams are looking at what does this package mean and what does it mean for the organisation in terms of a budget, of future budgets and how it fits into the long-term plan. So that's a bit of work that we'll bring back to you shortly. It is going to have, it's looking like it's going to be quite a significant impact. And we've talked about that before. The other focus for the organisation has been on working on the long-term plan, and we've been involved in a number of workshops over the last wee while that you're aware of, and that's a real focus getting that work done, and noting that we're on quite a tight time frame to deliver that long-term plan, and which will be signed off in June next year. So a lot of work to be done. So but happy to take any questions on the rest of the report.
Alan. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rob, just two questions really on the notified applications that have come through or that are on our report on page 49. So the Fields Trails Trust has come through, just questioning the nature of the 40% waiver of our fee, what drove that? And then secondly, the Alliance Group Mataura hearing has been deferred, awaiting a new date. So could just a little bit more information on that. Is that something that's driven from their end, or is it more to do with COVID and not being able to set up?
And through your chair, I'll ask Lynn Smith to answer those, the GM in charge of the area. And
through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to Fields Trails Trust, 40% waiver is actually by council, accepting that this is a community good project for the trails. Therefore, in accordance with the long-term plan, the cost of processing those consents were discounted. So that was ourselves discounting the processing costs of that. With respect to Alliance Group Mataura, a teleconference meeting occurred between the applicant and Environment Southland shortly after the release of Action for Health and Waterways package, being the NPS, NES and Section 360 regulations, where we agreed that caucusing between all parties was an appropriate approach forward to ensure that we understood the implications of the package on this application was worked through to try and ensure that the hearing process itself, when it does occur later this year, is as smooth as possible, to narrow essentially the areas of dispute.
Neville and Lloyd.
I understand the Mataura hearings starting the week, meeting the 30th of November. Site visit and a hearing after that, and in the meantime, Councillor Roy is doing the pre-hearing.
Today.
Today?
Today.
There you go, everything's happening.
On the case.
So the hearing dates have been set now since these hearings.
So that. Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I noticed on page 55 there's been an incident and there's a question mark over the quad bike. That's not the first time we've had that. And I was just wondering, as part of the ongoing work, whether do we need a quad bike, and then is a side-by-side more practical? I was just wondering where your thinking was there. Obviously, we're going places where we can't take a normal vehicle, and we do have a multi-terrain vehicle here as well, but it's quite a cumbersome thing, but it's useful in its own purpose. So I was just wondering where your thinking was on that.
And look, we're doing that thinking at the moment around our future needs and noting risk and all of those things, so that bit of work's going on. Unless, Amy, anything else you want to add to that?
No, it's part of the review, it's part of we're looking at the investigation to check whether we actually need a quad bike as part of our focus. So we're doing that.
I think this year and quad bikes in general are pretty high maintenance, so if we can find a better solution there, that would be be good. My second question really relates to the operational support, and I wondered whether, I don't think we do, but are we able to track phone calls coming into the organisation by ratepayer and actually have a history of the previous calls and previous inquiries into the organisation sitting there for staff and others at their fingertips? I know this occurs in other organisations, so you can actually see how often, what the concern is that they've raised, or whether they're just running around different people trying to get an answer they want and playing one off against the other. So I was just wondering whether we had thought about, or I don't think we do have, the ability to track conversations coming in from the public.
Can I ask Neil to comment, answer that question?
Yeah, we don't have a sophisticated solution. There are through Iris and through maybe more ad hoc systems, we're capturing some of those calls, but it's not good enough. So we've got a program of work which is the contacts, reviewing our contacts database and making sure that we've got all those pieces together so that we have kind of one source of truth over our contacts. Once we've done that piece of work, then we have the ability to look at more of a sophisticated customer services relationship management type of. We've got to do the groundwork first.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Emergency Management Southland, that's part of this. I just noticed, Rob, that under initiatives there, this could be a minor point, the Riverton Schools Tsunami Hikoi, well, Hikoi means to walk. Would it be better to call it the Riverton Schools Tsunami Oma, which means to run?
I'll take that advice back, Councillor. That could well be. I'm not sure on that on details. I think that might have been the school's term, but
Any further questions on Rob's report?
I'll move that we receive the report.
Moved by Neville, seconded for that. Seconded by Lloyd. I'll put the motion, all in favour will say aye. Right, we'll move to item 2, which is rates setting levies on page 58. Welcome, Tanya and Malcolm. Would you like to make any comments?
Hi, I'm Malcolm Brown. We're going through the formalities of setting the rates. You find people have already done your budgeting and your plans, and my job is to ensure that that money comes forward. Your totals don't change as such, but the levies do alter slightly because it's a living document. I'm in the process of doing 57 sales today. Within that, there may be land sold from dock, rateable, and vice versa. Trade off. So they all match up, it's all set to go. We're a bit short of the uniform annual general charges. That's always going to be the case. Our system isn't very cooperative there. We're about 37. You had a nice figure of 45,900 UAGCs for the year. I can't get that, sorry. I just can't get that close.
$3,000.
Yeah, if I waited about a month after I strike the rates, I'll get that total. No guarantees with uniform intervenal charges. Farmers buy land next to them, which is quite common nowadays, and it becomes contiguous. So we lose them. Somebody subdivides, gets a new owner in there, and they go into UAGC. So you're dealing with 45,000 of them, we're out by 37, too bad off. Most of the time in the past, though, we used to take it a bit shorter than what we expected, but now we seem to try to be far too accurate. Anyway, any questions? Go for your life.
Any questions on this item? It's quite a comprehensive breakdown of the strike rates from everything from rivers to Floyd.
Just for clarity, so I haven't done the percentage in my head, but I think you're talking about maybe at 1%, maybe of UXC, GC, is that right? You sort of.
No guarantee.
Yeah.
Absolutely no. I give that information to my leaders way back in January. QV play around with us because we don't pay them any money. They're not out their favourite customers. But in the final July download for the entire year, you pick up a lot of information, a lot more than you really should. As I said, QV, we're not their favourite people.
37 and 45,000 is less than 1%.
So I suppose the follow-up question is, Mr. Chairman, do we catch that up later on, or do we have to have this error for a year and then we?
You have to have the error for a year. You'll be $3,000 short, so we cancel all the lunches for the next week and a half. Start.
I was going to say, we've got a lot we're going Chair, that you may notice that we've changed the format of the strike resolution to be in line with what we had in the annual plan. So we've copied, particularly like the look of another regional council who used this format, and we have copied that, and we felt that the numbers far more understandable than the 8 decimal points that in the original form. And when you look through them, you can see the significant difference between the different levies. It's much more apparent than it was when you had to count off 4 decimals, 4 sets of zeros. So I trust that is satisfactory. Other than that, we have moved the legal ease to the back of the document where we discuss the different parts of the Act under which each of the rates are set. The rates penalties are, as they have been in the past, same dates. Thank you, Malcolm. He's spent a lot of time reconciling this so that we get exactly the total other than the UAGC amount that he's described. Will be as per the
Thanks for that, Tony. So the recommendation on page 1, which looked relatively simple, that actually will tax on to the bit on page 65 with the breakdown. So we can just move that as one, I assuming.
I'm happy to move. I think we've been through this in workshops. It's been put together by multi meetings right through the region and back again. So this is where we struck after a legal process right through the COVID-19 period and further on. So with that in mind, I'm happy to move all the resolutions that we have in front of us.
Seconded by Lyndall. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move to item 3. Rates resolution amendment confirmation. Any comments on this item? It's pretty straightforward, Talia.
Thank you, Chair. As per our workshop, we've been through this discussion. Coming out of COVID, coming out of lockdown, there were a greater amount of outstanding rates, as you can anticipate. Difficulty in those 3 months for a number of our ratepayers, and the council has foresaw that and foreshadowed that in the budgeting that we did during that time, and allowed for the fact that the penalty, as many other councils did throughout New Zealand, it would be appropriate to not strike that penalty on the first of I'm going to move that.
Moved by Lyndall, seconded by Jeremy. That's pretty straightforward, and it was in consideration of a pretty stressful time. So I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
To item 4, which is the Natara Liaison Committee funding applications. Welcome, Jono, Patty and Dave. Would you like to comment on the item?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'll just take it that the item's been read rather than me read through it. I appreciate there's probably a couple of new councillors in here that probably weren't privy to some of the early goings on with this, but hopefully we've covered the history of it there. I guess just are there any points of clarity or concerns with the item?
Lloyd.
I'm actually quite supportive of this in principle, so I've got no problem with it, but I was disappointed to see that of the one application we had, it didn't meet a criteria. I think if we went back far enough, part of the history was that I think the chairman of Matara thought that this money would actually be transferred to the catchments, and they could actually use that as a funding base to actually leverage, ratchet more money for work projects within their group. That hasn't played out that way, but the big hurdle there seems to be their structures. Their structures aren't able to handle monies going through like this. So is there a way, my question really is there a way of us actually helping them find these structures? Because going forward, these structures are going to be very important to handle not only work programs, accountability reporting, but we need to be able to attract other fundings, whether it's local or national, to have this work on the ground. And it could actually be that we put, from a council perspective, money or work programs through those organisation structures because we have a desire to bring the FMUs, and it could be right down to a sub-partner to catchments, for a greater good, and they may have a little part to play in that work program. Are we able to do that, to help them through that?
If I could just take you back to this particular scenario, there's probably a wee bit of confusion around some of the groups thought they needed an incorporated society and bank account. When I've looked at this further, the minor works condition agreement that we've got here doesn't actually specify the need to have that. The clause in there that around that is the applicant agrees to produce prior to the claim for assistance such receipts, invoices and vouchers relevant to the project as we might require. And my further comment on that is the way I see it here is the applicant purchases material for the project. As long as these have receipts for the money, that could just about be paid back pretty much straight away. So there's not a need for an incorporated society as part of this. There's some confusion around that. I suppose what it would mean for a member of that group is they'd have to probably use their own bank account in the first instance, and that might be where the unwillingness to do that is. I don't know.
Through you, Chair.
Yeah.
Through you, Chair. So the simple answer is yes. There'll be ways to find our way through that. It'll be a dialogue with the catchment groups. They'll each be a little bit different. As I've said, some will be able to some will actually even incorporate, and it'll be a much more streamlined process. Others will have to do a little workaround for a while. So I think the simple answer is yes. There's ways through this. It gets a little bit trickier, and it's one of our issues is if they haven't got a firm idea of what they want to spend the money on, so that becomes a little bit more of a, from our probity point of view, we need to be conscious of that. So, but there's ways of working through that.
We were going to run it along the lines of, like with Makarewa, they had their interests that they wanted to spend on that access track. One of the local guys on that committee, he paid for everything, sent in his invoices straight away, we paid it up front very quickly. And it was this was set up for auditing purposes, so it's public funds. We just couldn't give them a whole lump sum. There was a few comments, I think, Councillor McFarlane members without having these up in one of the local halls. So this was one way of actually just making sure that these things are going to be run right. But there is no restriction and no incorporated societies set up at all.
A couple, just before we're on that topic, I'm just wondering, have we given out a criteria to these groups? Because this is quite an honourable thing that this group's wanting to do, is actually empower their catchment groups. And okay, there's got to be accountability because it's because where the money's coming from, but if we can make it easier for them and say, look, this is the process, these are the things that actually qualify, I think we'll go a long way.
Through your chair, the answer is yes, there is a clear criteria. There was quite a lot of dialogue with catchment groups around the criteria. I think it's one of those situations where it's the first time that this catchment group had this opportunity. One or two have engaged, they found it trickier to get through the process. They're also working through what changes they need to make in their own internal structures to make this type of step in the way they operate work. So it's, as I said, we'll just work with these groups. The important thing is that we roll it over, which gives us a chance to work with the groups to progressively move it forward. It usually takes a few years for these sort of things to resolve, particularly when you've got groups that are forming themselves, not only their own structures, but what they want to do with resources that are made available. And that's a really important element. Macquarie was a good example. They had a really clear objective, a really clear project. If you haven't got that, that makes it a little bit harder for us in terms of how we manage and implement it.
I've got Jeremy, then David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, just in regards to these catchment groups, and trying to source funds right in Southport must be quite, like they're certainly going to help because in regards to their sort of taking control, actually helping the catchment groups and actually having people on board that will be able to work through this and have us connect or liaison groups to connect. So there's obviously people that have been this year like, coming into play that will certainly these situations. I would have seen.
So through you,
drive those catchment groups to get money.
Through you, there's a number of groups. Like there's Landcare Trust, there's Thriving South, and there's a number of groups that they can work with. I think our key element is to work the best we can directly with those groups and ensure that there's a structure that allows them to come up with projects that are clear and specific enough to merit public funds, and then that we have some either workaround processes or established processes that allow them to access those funds.
I've got David, Peter, Lyndall, then Alan. David.
It's just around the criteria and not being able to meet it. A lot of catchment groups now want to get more and more information within their catchment, and a lot of it's on water quality. It's not really to question what Environment South has done in the past, it's just to get more information. And I think that the science team here, the catchment groups in particular, need to work with the science team here to make sure that that's quality science and it's credible. And I think that's one area that we do need to be sort of making sure that does happen, because I understand there has been a question too over not only their motive but also the quality of that science. So it's something we need to look at. The science team need to be involved in.
Peter.
Oh, yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I can't see you, Jonathan, but I assume that's you there. I just want to say the catchment groups themselves, one of their biggest needs is that Environment South can take a lead in is providing that technical information. And I know it's pretty hard after work picking yourself up and going out after tea out into the province and talking to groups, but that's exactly the sort of effort that you need to put in around that technical help. And also are you communicating with Thriving Southland, because Thriving Southland seems to be the vehicle now which is liaising with the catchment groups and providing that administrative support. So I think hopefully we're working closely with Thriving Southland instead of the individual groups as well.
The answer is yes to both.
Thank you.
Lyndall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The other funding mechanisms that you refer to, is that what you're talking about, the things like the Thriving Southland
Correct. There's, and as you will know, with COVID and the shovel ready and government funds, there's been quite a rapid increase in the amount of funding available from different sources. So
So if I might, Mr Chairman, just to reinforce the fact that we have to, if people are trying to do the right thing, really important that we make it easy for them to do that. Good luck finding an easy way through this so that we can actually take it up. Thanks.
Alan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Chair. So do you envisage that they will be coming back in another year for a further 25,000? Obviously they came for the 25,000, they didn't get it spent, so that'll roll forward if that's what we agree. Was it their intention that this could be an annual request for 25,000?
Was to be reviewed after the first year by the council. That's why we're here.
Through here, so given that we're in the startup phase, we'll come back and review it, at the end of this round as well.
It's only been a request to roll it over at this stage, not to extend it.
Yeah, not to extend it.
And going forward, as already been alluded to with Driving Southland having some funding, we need to have some linked up conversations so there's no double up. So, but we've had a pretty good discussion. And what I'm hearing around the table is
I'm happy to move that.
so you're moving that we roll over because you have a not to or.
Yep.
I'll second that.
You roll over. So moved and seconded. Any further discussion? I will put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 5, which is Southport, New Zealand Limited's annual meeting, appointment of a proxy.
This is really just a machinery item for councillors to appoint their proxy to attend the Southport meeting and confirming that council will vote in accordance with its resolutions, which have already been dealt with through the Southport subcommittee recommendations being adopted by council. Standard approach has been that the chair of the Southport subcommittee is the proxy, but for any reason he is unable to attend, the chairman of council is appointed as the alternate.
Can I move those 3 recommendations, please?
I'll second.
Moved by Niels, seconded by Eric. Any further discussion? It's a pretty standard one. I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 6, which is the update to the staff delegations manual. Would you like to comment on the item?
Well, just some small changes to the RMA that we put up in delegations. Plus, we wanted to clean up the delegation regarding hearing commissioner appointments so that there's no question about whether they're correctly appointed or not. The change to the delegation for 88H, it actually reflects current practice. There was a piece in the RMA saying that we need to carry out a duty if the fee wasn't paid. We've always excluded that time frame. This is just reflecting a new piece of the legislation and putting the delegation down to consent officers or consent administrators. The other one there about the suspension of processing, it'll be judged on a case-by-case basis. Most applicants at the non-notified level would request the suspension of processing so they could have more time to think about draft conditions, for example. If they chose to hang on to that for more than 20 days, then there's a risk that they'll tie up the resource, preventing another application for that resource. So in those circumstances, we may consider sending the application back. Beyond that, the issue about the hearing commissioners, it's more a matter of timing. The way the delegation is drafted here is if they've gone through the certification process, then they would hold the delegation but could only exercise upon appointment by the consent manager. So that effectively is the delegation's changes to the proposal.
So the changes are very much administrative measures to reflect the recent changes to the law and to make the appointment of hearing commissioners as efficient and effective as possible. forward. And so they're quite administrative in nature.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Lloyd?
Good understanding that, Mr. Chairman, through you, then I presume that it could be done at a consent officer level or in the consent department or higher. It doesn't have to go down to that lower level, does it? It can be, depending on the application in front of you, that might be a joint discussion between consenting staff, I'm thinking of Aurora type stuff, and yourself, and you're leaving us, but the person in your position may say, look, we actually need a certain skill set around here. We might look at the options in front of us to get the right commission. Is that how it would work?
Exactly right. There's always the opportunity, whilst the delegation is ideally set at the lowest level, it can be, that delegation is also held by all other persons above, and from time to time the decision is made at the highest level rather than the lowest level on a case-by-case basis.
Any further questions or comments on this item?
I'm happy to move, Mr. Chairman, if there's
Moved
no.
by Lloyd and second by Neville. No further discussion. I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. We'll move to item 7, which is LG and Z Zone 5 and 6 meeting attendance.
This is just a rescheduled LGNZ meeting that was previously put off as a result of COVID. Unfortunately, it clashes with the council's visit to Te Anau, but the opportunity is here if somebody wishes to have, the council wishes to be represented at the meeting to make representations.
Neville.
Because of the conflict with our existing program, that we not send anybody to this particular local government meeting.
Thank you for that, Neville. We had a discussion prior to the meeting, and that seemed to be the consensus. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Lyndall. And I can talk to one of the mayors if there's anything that we need to know before the minutes come out. We can do that. Lloyd.
So just clarification on that. We're in unprecedented times, so we have changes come at us at very short notice. Let's say, for instance, that our trip or our other alternative was cancelled for whatever reason, and it was available for someone to go, or someone made themselves available. I presume it would be done in consultation with the chair or the CE, and that would be followed through, and then retrospectively we would do that resolution. I just want to make sure we're not totally closing the door if the opportunity did come.
I have actually advised the local people that it was unlikely that we would be attending, but if at short notice a decision was made to send somebody and they said you'd be welcomed in, so it wouldn't be a barrier that
Thank you.
they would have the capacity to take.
Chair, it's worth noting that the agenda at these zone meetings at the moment is dominated by the Three Waters discussion, which while it does impact on us, it's a direct impact on the territorial authorities in terms of their responsibilities. So just noting that.
And we've been pretty faithful in our attendance of these things over the year, and that was a conversation we had sort of prior to the meeting, that this one was particularly territorial phased in Buggers. Had a mover and seconder. If there's no further discussion, I'll put that motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to item 8, which is the councillors' meeting schedule.
I actually only have one amendment, and it's only a tentative one at this stage, but on Tuesday the 13th of October we're looking to include a potential workshop for councillors on flower and water quality. And we're already in that day, so it would be on 11 o'clock sort of a start, just to make the most of the time. That's just tentative at this stage, but I'll make sure that it works with staff.
Any additions? Or anything's been missed by any councillors there? Jeremy.
I'm sure I was
So I don't know.
Bonnie?
It's just not noted here, but the leave of absence for the 1st to the 8th of October.
Lyndall and David?
Thank you, Chair. I have my RMA Chairs training on the 20th of October in Wellington, so I won't be able to attend the
Chief Executive's Review Subcommittee. I'm sure you'll all behave.
David.
Subcommittee, Chief Executive Subcommittee.
Yes.
Yes, you will be, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Any further advances? Lloyd?
Apologies, I'm a tour group from the 7th of October to the 2nd of November, so I'll be absent for 2 workshops plus the council meeting on Friday the 30th.
We're also, that's prompted me, thank you, looking to move that meeting that's scheduled for the Friday the 30th back to the Wednesday. It was set there originally for the adoption of the annual report, but because that's now moved out to November, we can just go back to our standard Wednesday meetings. So that's what we're looking to do this evening.
Very good. Would somebody, if there's nothing further, I'd like to move the recommendation, moved by David, seconded by Ellen. All in favour say aye. We'll move to item 9, which is the common seal.
Common seal's been fixed under agreement.
Moved by Neville, seconded by Lloyd.
I have a question on it. See, I'm happy to second it, but I'd like some clarification from staff, maybe it's the CE. There seems to be a big number of warrant enforcement personnel within our staff, and I suppose my question is, do we need so many? I understand there is a hierarchy there, you can see that there, but I was actually a little bit surprised at that list, because I probably had a view it was in one area more than what seems to be outlined there.
Look, I'll start this and then Jen can follow on, but it also includes powers. So powers of entry and those sort of things. So there's some biosecurity powers there. So it isn't just, and some of those they might have enforcement responsibilities, but it's much about powers of entry. So under the various bits of legislation, whether it's and I see coastal people there as well. So a number of powers around the different bits of legislation we work with.
So Building Act responsibilities as well. So it covers our catchment people, our compliance team, and our biosecurity team largely.
Would it be possible, Mr. Chairman, to have a more detailed breakdown of that? The reason I say that is I think there is some expectations from the public, whether they're right or not. It would be good for councils to just get a better understanding of what our people can do.
So that's in the delegations manual. You know, I guess that would be listed there.
We have a warrants register that lists all our staff and exactly what they're warranted for. The reason you've got such a big list this time was we corrected the delegations manual 2 meetings ago in relation to Biosecurity Act approaches, and so we've had to call in all the warrants and reissue them, which is why you've got this at this stage. So I can certainly provide you with that warrant register list.
Is that on the website or is that held offline?
It's held offline, but it would be a publicly available document because everything goes through the council meetings.
Further questions, or you were happy to?
I'm happy to, I just wanted to get a little bit more clarification around that list, so thank you.
Further discussion, I'll put the motion, all in favour say aye. Aye. Okay, we'll move to item 10, which is the essential freshwater package.
I've been in this, I think you take us through this.
Welcome, Bit of Leslie.
So Chair, I was keen that we got a briefing on the package. We had a number of discussions, so I was keen to get it all into one place and to get Sabine and Lucy to talk you through how this all fits together. And as we talked about before, this has some significant implications for council going forward. So over to Sabine and Lucy.
Chair. Thank you, Rob. So hopefully you've all had a chance to have a look through the item. The table at the back's obviously got the meatier parts of what we're going to be doing currently, and some initial commentary on the various parcels of the package. The National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management and the NES, the National Environmental Standard for Freshwater, two most significant chunks of that package, and then the two Section 360 regulations, one for stock exclusion and one regarding water takes. The final part of the puzzle is the amendments that have been made to the Resource Management Act. As Rob said, the package will significantly increase both the complexity and the quantity of work that is required, and so therefore there's significant resourcing implications which we are able to work through at the moment. So we're working through the detail of the documents. It's fair to say, as I've talked to some of you about, these things don't match nicely with what we've already got, and so we are having to do a substantial amount of analysis to determine where there are overlaps and where there are bits that don't fit in. In the interim, we're getting lots of inquiries, obviously, via our Land and Water Services team, via our consents team, and just general inquiries that we're managing. And the work that is currently underway is to develop the two detailed work programs that are required to implement these new pieces of legislation. I guess one of the things I wanted to highlight is that though the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management is new, it's broadly a rewrite and it's not a revolutionary thing, it's an evolution of what we already had. The NES is significantly different, and so it's that we've been focusing our attention on to determine what the implications of it are. I've been out and about, as have others, communicating what these things mean and what our approach is going to be with the community, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have to the best of my ability, caveating that we are still working through this.
To speak to the neatly and overlap between NES and the Water and Land Bank, this is a matter that the court has also requested clarification about, and we're going to be needing to report back to the court later this year around that very matter. So there is significant interest by the community and the court about how this will come together.
I should have been more specific about that too. In advance of us heading into mediation pre-Christmas, the court has identified that we need to do the analysis of what it means for the appeals in advance of any mediation. So.
Lloyd.
Yeah, I'm happy with what you've said to me, and there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered, so I'm not going to go into that sort of detail, but reading through the table at the back, there's quite a common theme of monitoring, analysis, reporting. I suppose I'm not sure where that leads to. It's not clear to me that that actually starts to facilitate new policy and strategies, or whether it's just reporting for the sake of reporting and sending out messages. I was wondering, it's probably a criticism of our own processes up to date as we do a lot of reporting analysis, but I'm not sure that actually loops back in to actually improve or drive the right behaviour. I'm just wondering whether we can start to pick some of that up through this, so it actually does something, that actually makes change, not just an exercise of reporting.
So there's a couple of points in answer to that. Yes, there's additional reporting that's going to be required, and some of that's from the community and some of it's us holding information. So there's a bunch of pieces that we're working through to determine what that's going to look like and how we're going to handle all that additional information that's both coming in but also that we're requiring. So that's one part. The second part is around the use of farm environment plans, so and the auditability of those. That was one of the edits that was made to the RMA, but those powers haven't been activated yet, so we haven't got the structure required to actually mandate farm plans yet and what that might look like, but that's in development. The staff across the organisation are involved in that, and staff across the country working on that stream of work to how we regulate farm plans and how we create the auditability and the certification that's required. So that's going to be an additional kind of reporting and auditing of those things to actually give us more of an indication of what their outputs are and what effect they're having, certainly on water quality. But broad ranging, lots of monitoring conditions, lots of reporting conditions.
I understand that quite a few of the provisions in the NES are reasonably short term that I think when limit setting kicks in, some of them drop off. Could you perhaps talk about that at all?
Yep. So the number of provisions within the NES are temporary and do have an expiration date on them, but the NPS, we won't be able to go more lenient than those once they do drop off. The NPS will pick up those and make sure that our plan change that has to give effect to the NPS will take those things into account. So the intention from the government with the NES would halt any further decline, which means that it takes effect as of now. The NPS has got a longer implementation time frame, which means that we have obviously until the end of 2024 to implement it fully. So the yes, though they are temporary, they won't go. They won't be gone when they expire.
Alan?
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, Vin, you have been involved 6+ years in the council, obviously hold a lot of information in your head. Who have you debriefing to in the short term? Because I guess initially we haven't got a replacement, so who's holding the work in progress that you've had with the water and land plan and the liaison work with, and obviously your legal team? So who's carrying the load that you've been carrying?
The very person to my right has increasingly picked up the relationship with the day-to-day management of the water and land plan appeals and has been progressing that approach for some time. So Lucy has the relationship already in place with Wynne Williams. We also have quite an extensive team that's supporting Lucy, being Matthew McCullum-Clark from Insight as our principal lead planner. We also have a substantive team in-house that is supporting Lucy and Matthew with those appeals. So this has been an ongoing process for a number of years to ensure that no one person holds all of the information, and therefore the run over by a bus test is well in train and well in hand.
Single point of failure.
That's right.
We'll banish the West Coast, but David.
Just a question for both of you. At the moment, we've got a court case in process, and we've been waiting to see what the outcome, obviously, and so that outcome will have an effect on just where we head. Have you had any indication there at all?
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Chair, the latest from the court, we had direction that came in about 2.5 weeks ago for final pieces of the puzzle for topic A. So we had to submit a memo on Friday, which included how both setting the forward view for how we're going to deal with topic B, but addressing some final matters to tidy up on topic A. In addition, the court has directed us to undertake a section 32AA analysis. Technically, it's the responsibility of the court to determine how far away we've gone from the decision version, what the implications of that are, but they've asked us to do that on their behalf, and so that's a piece of work my team's working on at the moment in liaison with Matthew and with Philip from Williams. They have indicated, the judge has indicated that we are moving quickly. They wanted us to come up with a schedule for mediation to commence pre-Christmas, which means that in order for that to happen, they have to be issuing their final decision on the topic A matters within the next few weeks, because otherwise we won't have time to do the actual planning that's required for mediation. So we'll be doing more of a detailed briefing to strategy and policy in a couple of weeks, but the timeframes for mediation have been outlined in that minute that we had to submit on Friday. So there's an ordering there for the topics that we still need to navigate through. Some elements are going to be hopefully directly negotiated. Some parties have indicated that they want to go straight to hearing. So Meridian have indicated that on their matters they're not interested in mediating. They want to take it straight to hearing for a couple of points. So that would be a very discreet hearing, but tight timeframes, etc. But again, we're waiting to hear back from the court again on what we've put up. So the section 32AA will be happening. We've already commenced that work, and that will need to be done by the end of October. And alongside that, all of this analysis of what it's meant for the NES and NPS, in order for us to actually head into mediation on some of the easier points, hopefully, in advance of Christmas, with the bulk of mediation commencing.
The court has also recently released an interim decision with respect to the Wilkins consent application, where it has sought council and the applicant to further refine the suite of consent conditions. And so we will shortly, hopefully, receive the final decision, which will give us greater clarity on how the plan is actually applied on a consent by consent basis as well. So the court has put in quite a bit of time and effort in understanding both the plan structure and how it's actually applied on the ground.
Further questions for
Peter's.
Pardon? Oh, Peter, sorry, Peter. Go, Peter.
Yeah, thanks, Vin and Lucy, for that. You know, there might be people streaming in watching this. In layman's terms, what is the court doing with their plan? You know, there was quite a lot of work done on it and a huge amount of effort and resource put into it. And as I understand, a hold the line plan. Have they ascertained that it wasn't fit for purpose and they're going to make it fit for purpose? Is that correct? Can you give us just a brief, very brief outline of why this is happening?
I'll give it a first go, and then I might allow Vin to step in as well. I think in very high level, and I suppose as layman as I can be, being that I'm still RMA novice really, I would say that the appeals that were lodged 2.5 years ago-ish, just before I came here, are being resolved through the court at the moment. And though the world is slightly different now than it was 2.5 years ago, those are the matters that are currently before the court. The way that the court decided to manage those was in two chunks, and that's what the topic A and topic B delineation is. That separation of the higher level elements of the plan, so the objectives and some of those high level policies, physiographics, etc. And the next part to come is the detail around the rules and the remaining policies. The hearings, we've had 2 lots of hearings, we've had 3 interim decisions, we've had all of the new swagger stuff that's come through the government. So I think that what we found, the court was giving us a pretty good test. The plan was being tested to see how it would hold up. And they've made some pretty small but significant changes to the objectives, and that's to give effect to the Te Mana o Te Wai element, which we've now seen come through in terms of the NPSFM. We haven't been given the impression it's not fit for purpose. They understand that its intent is to set the way for limits to come, and they know that this is not the end of the puzzle. But yes, it's certainly been an interesting journey, and not necessarily one I was anticipating when I first arrived. But
Sorry, I sold that one to Lucy.
Yeah.
And so, in really simple terms, within the scope of appeals, the court is making sure that the plan gives effect to the higher order laws such as the RMA and the regulation that flows from it, being the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, etc.
Yes, we're in the,
Thanks very much for that.
yes, we're in the unenviable position of being the council that's got a plan going through, and we're the guinea pigs to a certain extent, and decisions made on ours will probably benefit a lot of other councils around the area. Wonder if we could take the hat round.
No.
It's interesting too that you mentioned that the ECAN Plan Change 7 hearing is happening right now, and they've implemented a couple of changes based on the Essential Fresh Water Package. So there's some interesting intel coming already that we are getting from that process as well. So yeah, lots of movement.
Do you just excuse me through you, Mr. Chair, just to follow up to that, Lucy and Vin. Do you think that the Southland Land and Water Plan, how it was designed initially, and that was a hold the line plan, tilt limit setting? Do you think it'll come out the other end significantly different to what it was intended to do?
I think we're operating, and the court is operating within tight parameters in terms of what is within the scope of the appeals. So it can't look dramatically different than what was intended due to that those scope elements. Any changes that are being made have to be done within those bounds.
And just to build on what Lucy has said, the water and land plan was essentially drafted around 2014, utilising our knowledge and understanding that existed at that time. Our knowledge and understanding of the state of Southland's environment has evolved through that period, which is also being reflected within the court's decisions and amendments they're making to the plan.
Thank you for that. That's a good explanation.
So objective 18 was obviously the last of the objectives. Has that made it through the court's process, and what sort of outcome did it result? Did it stay intact, or has it been tweaked?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was some toing and froing with the court. I think we got the wrong end of the message in terms of what their intention was with Objective 18. There was some talk about getting rid of it completely, and we took that to parties, and parties were comfortable that because we'd strengthened the other objectives that maybe it wasn't as necessary. We put that to the court, and the court came back and went, whoa, that wasn't what we meant. We need Objective 18. It needs to be in there. It needs to be the intention of it needs to be retained. And so yes, there is an Objective 18, but it has been tweaked. So. But again, just in an interim decision at the moment, so we'll see what the court actually determines. It's still there, it's just slightly tweaked.
Thank you, Neville moved and seconded by David. No further comments. I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, that will complete our open session agenda for today. So, well, Jan, we're confirming going offline. I'll get you to give us the reasons for going into public excluded.
Okay, reasons are to prevent disclosure, use of official information for improper gain or advantage, to protect the privacy of natural persons, to allow council to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, and that the matter may be subject to proceedings in the Environment Court.
Thank you for that. Would somebody like to move that we move into public excluded? Jeremy, seconded by Lloyd Esler. All in favour say aye. Aye. Okay. Item 12, the first item up, is it? Which is the confirmation of minutes.